Hi there, I'm John from CNCKing.com, and today we make a traditional custom stamp. The stamp here you see actually is 5 inches by 6 inches, so it's definitely a large stamp. And what I found through the years, I've made a ton of custom stamps, is that the backing needs to be something relatively solid. In this case here is 3/4 inch plywood, so this is not going anywhere. It is dead flat because it's furniture grade plywood, so that's why you don't see any voids inside of it. And the other thing I found through the years is when it comes to making traditional stamps like this, the smaller ones, you always have that little thing you sort of hold and it lifts up and brings down the stamp. But when you have larger stamps like this, I found that it's actually quite difficult because you have such a large area and a very small sort of area to sort of control the flatness. And also over time, if you're doing a lot of stamping, holding something like this is actually quite hard on your hand because you're putting force down repeatedly. So you end up killing your fingers. So what I found through the years is whenever we do stamps of this size or larger, we've done, of course, larger ones, it's easier actually to hold it in the palm of your hand. And you have the thickness, so you can see here, you just got to adjust it a little bit, but you have more than enough thickness to grab it really, really well. It's more of a natural sort of hold. And when you're going to the ink pad, you're going down, then you're going onto the material. So this process I find is more economic and more ergonomic for the customer when it comes to doing lots of stamping using something of this size. When I first started CNCKing.com, I never really imagined that I'd actually be doing rubber stamps. It wasn't something that I had any plan for. Although my machine and the software and everything is optimized for making that, I always thought about going into the industrial market, not the sort of consumer market or small business market that we do most of these stamps for. That being said, we do a ton of stamps here in the shop. I don't show all the stamps we make because it gets kind of repetitive for videos, but whenever I need some space to fill, I just film a stamp making process and we go from there. Most of the stamps we do are the self-inking ones from Trodat. And we just make the rubber and we stick it underneath and they have a self-inking stamp with the ink pad integrated into it. But sometimes there's some shapes or sizes that just don't fit within that formula. And this is a prime example of one. In this case here, I believe it was 5 inches by 4 inches, and we just can't get a self-inking stamp at that size. Now, in this case here, all I did was use the laser to produce it. And then I used, I think it's 3/4 inch plywood as a backing for it. And what the 3/4 inch plywood does is that it provides a very flat surface so that when you're inking this into your ink pad and then inking the paper or the cardboard that you'll be using this for, it's as flat as possible. And that's why I'm using the sander here. What I'm doing is I cut it with the bandsaw roughly to where I need it to be. And then what the sander does is make it a nice flush edge for the rubber and the plywood. Now when it comes to making custom rubber stamps, we can literally make them out of any material. In this case here, it happens to be rubber. But if you wanted this stamp actually to be engraved in, say, I wouldn't do it in plywood. If it was actually engraved in a hardwood, let's say maple or maybe even oak, if you want to really have something rustic looking, we can do that for you just as easily. The nice thing about the rubber is that when it comes to ink, it absorbs ink just perfectly. It's a little bit more of a rustic look if we do solid hardwood stamps, which we've done in the past. Another thing to keep in mind with stamps like this here is generally I leave the backing empty. Now you might be saying, well, how do you know what stamp it is? Well, it stands out like this. But this is actually pretty good because you can write down notes. So where did you get the ink pad from? How long do you have to hold the stamp into the ink pad? Again, it's very different stamping something of this size onto material than the traditional stamps where you have like little stamps like this that of course we also make. But it's a whole other ball game. It takes definitely some practice to get right. Because what you want to do is when you're stamping this, you want to stamp it dead flat. And that's easy with a small stamp, but it's a little more challenging with a large one. Another thing to keep in mind is if you're stamping onto something, you want to have something, let's say I was holding a piece of paper with my hand and I was stamping down on it. I won't get a very good imprint at all because there's some voids and it's not totally dead flat. But there's also too much give. So you want to stamp onto something that has somewhat solid backing but a little bit of give. and you'll produce the best results you can. Of course, when you go down like this, generally what I do is I just shake it a little bit, and again, that's just for my personal use. Whenever I make custom stamps, I just found that a little shake would actually produce a better result than just a straight up and down. So if you're looking for custom stamps, traditional stamps, or self-inking, we have the whole Trodat line at CNCKing.com. Just contact us, and we'll make it for you and ship it right to your door.